I know you know what rocks are, but did you know there's different kinds? Scientists split rocks into three main categories based on how they're formed. In this video, we're going to talk about those three types of rocks: sedimentary, igneous, and metamorphic. The first type of rock we're going to talk about is sedimentary rocks. Sedimentary rocks are formed over thousands or even millions of years. What happens is little bits and pieces of existing rocks all over the Earth's surface get broken off and get carried to a new place by wind or water. And eventually the water will take it to where all water ends, the ocean. Those tiny bits settle on the bottom of the ocean and make layers on top of layers over and over again. As more and more layers of rocks start to form, they build on top of each other, causing a lot of pressure, and eventually those rocks will become one solid formation. Over a bunch of time, those rocks can get exposed through other types of weathering and erosion, and we can see them on the surface. Lots of times, these rocks are really obvious with their layers, especially when you see them from far away and when they're really big, like maybe the Grand Canyon, but sometimes the bits and pieces of rocks, you might not be able to see the layers if they're just little, because they may have all come from one big layer from before. So they might be all one color if they're tiny. Doesn't matter either way, they're still formed the same way, so it's still a sedimentary rock. So remember that sedimentary rocks are formed from layers and layers and layers of existing rocks, and they're usually formed at the bottom of the ocean. The second type of rock we're going to talk about are igneous rocks. Igneous rocks are formed when molten rock, which is essentially lava, cools down really quickly. Usually that happens when it comes to the surface or when it hits water. So these rocks are a lot of times, they're found by volcanoes because that's where lava comes up and cools very quickly. So igneous rocks happen when the rocks cool down very quickly, but there can be two different factors that can affect how the rock will look when it's finished. Sometimes the gases get trapped inside those rocks, and you might get a rock that looks kind of like the rock called pumice, and you can actually see the holes in the rocks where the gas is trying to escape. The second factor that determines the texture of igneous rocks is just how fast that molten rock cools. Some rocks are formed when the volcanoes erupt and the magma can cool really quickly. So if it hits the ocean, you might get a rock called obsidian. It's a very smooth, glassy, textured rock because it cools so quickly, everything is just trapped. But sometimes igneous rocks form inside the earth, and the magma, as it moves closer to the crust, will start to cool without ever coming up to the surface. So it's still hot, but it's cooler than what it was. Those types of rocks would form really big crystals, and you might get things like granite. So remember, igneous rocks are formed from when molten rock cools. That can happen in a variety of different ways that causes a variety of different textures. Lots of times these rocks are found near volcanoes, and a lot of times these rocks are black, although they can come in a variety of shapes and textures. The third type of rock we're going to talk about are metamorphic rocks. Metamorphosis is a word that means to change. So metamorphic rocks actually do just that. They start as sedimentary rocks or igneous rocks and change into a new rock after like a whole bunch of heat or a whole bunch of pressure or both is able to form that rock into a new one. It happens really deep within the earth where there's all that heat and pressure, where the molten rock actually starts. So a lot of times rocks are completely melted down when they change. So if all this happens deep within the earth, you might ask, how do we even get metamorphic rocks on the surface? Well, since all this happens way deep in the earth, like where the tectonic plates are happening, when uplift occurs because of tectonic plates colliding, we get like mountains or mountain ranges or even hills. So that brings the metamorphic rocks up with it from deep within the earth. That's a much slower process than the way igneous rocks would get to the surface of the earth, like from a volcano. So remember, metamorphic rocks happen and are formed from igneous or sedimentary rocks that have changed under intense heat or pressure. And they're often found near mountain ranges because they're originally formed deep within the earth. When they finally make it to the surface, it's because of that plate tectonics uplift. Now that you've had a chance to watch this video and learn about the 3 types of rocks, sedimentary rocks, metamorphic rocks, and igneous rocks, you can watch my Identifying Rocks practice video so that you can practice identifying rocks based on their categories and characteristics. Hi! If you enjoyed the content of this video and you're looking for more, you can check out the link in the description for my Teachers Pay Teachers unit. There you might be able to find additional worksheets where students can read about this topic. They might be able to practice and apply their knowledge, or you might even find pre-made questions that work with this video. So take a look.